Hello, everyone. Welcome to this lesson 11 of chapter 13 of the Initiation into Spiritism, this program that the United States Spiritist Federation has taken upon itself to themselves to actually bring us, whether we are newcomers to Spiritism or those that have already been engaged in studying Spiritism, lessons pertaining to different topics. So today we are going to be talking about marriage and divorce. We are very grateful for the opportunity that we have been given by the United States Spiritist Federation. My name is Andreia Netto, and I live in Miami Beach, Florida, and I am from the Conscious Living Spiritist group. And once again, I thank the United States Spiritist Federation for having me. And for you who may be joining, wondering where or what books we utilized supporting material for what we are going to be bringing today, we just want to point out that we did use extensively for our study, although we're not going to bring all of the content that we studied because of the time that we have, but we just reading the Spirit's book and also the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. Actually, these two books are those books that need to be read and read over and over and over, because as we gain in knowledge in Spiritism, our understanding and perception about a lot of what Allan Kardec and the Benefactors brought us actually amplifies it, it grows, it broadens. And so what we may read today on one question, tomorrow it's going to be a whole different landscape of ideas, if you will. We also utilize the three books by Francisco Cândido Xavier and the Spirit author, Andrew Lewis, which is contained in the series Life in the Spirit World, starting with No Solar, Between Heaven and Earth, and also the book Evolution into a World, which is the last translation of the series that came out, one of the toughest books contained in the series, but it is never too tough when we have a study group or when we have a Spiritist Center willing to guide us through the reading of the pages of these blessed books. So we welcome you to do just that. So we wanted to start out with question 695 of the Spirit's book, in which Allan Kardec asked the benevolent spirits, is marriage the permanent union of two individuals contrary to the law of nature? In which they answered Allan Kardec, it represents progress in the evolution of humankind. So when the author of the book Initiation into Spiritism, Teresinha de Oliveira, Teresa of Oliveira, brought us her chapters, her lessons on marriage and evolution, she actually gives us an idea of how marriage and the evolution has actually taken place along the time, right? So she's going to tell us, I'm going to go ahead and read. I wish I had slides for you, but I'm going to read what she says. She says, while still in the early stages as intelligent principle and in their early experiences on the animal scale, living beings made it only guided by instinct, without greater responsibility of affective ties. In Spiritism, we call this the state of nature. Little by little, however, she continues, in certain species, considerable changes took place in the sexual relationships of beings with the development of affectivity, responsibility for the offspring, and sometimes monogamy. So I wanted to bring something really interesting, because a lot of people have read about the aspect of monogamy in the animal realm, in the animal kingdom. And I'm not sure if you guys know about this, but black vultures are actually monogamous. I'm not sure if you knew that. It's just a fun fact that I was reading about some of the animals that have already taken this type of activity in which they're monogamous. But they say that they're monogamous because it appears that scientists find out that if a vulture is caught cheating, meaning mating with another partner as opposed to their first one, this happens very rarely, the cheater is actually attacked by a group of the fellow vultures. And it kind of reminded me about the adulterous woman. I'm not sure if you're finding this humorous, but I did. when I was reading about this, because I said, my goodness, it's like the adulterous woman 2,000 years ago, when she was caught in adultery and they brought her before Christ, asking him what they should do. Right at that time, it was said that she should be stoned to death. And of course, Christ gave us the lesson that has stayed with us forever. Although we are not yet practicing, perhaps one day it will become part of our nature, in which he said, let there be whomever is without sin to cast the first stone. And of course, it didn't happen, because little by little, everybody started walking away. So it's interesting to see how the aspect of relationships have evolved throughout time. And she says, when the spirit reaches the human scale, its sexual behavior, which is brought on from its bodily experiences in the animal kingdom, undergoes great modification. Something changes as that intelligent principle is evolving, right? And so on question 696 of the Spirit's book, right after the very first question that we read about marriage being actually not contrary to the law of nature, meaning it actually is a divine law. And so he asks, what effect would abolishing marriage have on human society? And so the spirits answered, a return to the life of the animals. Now let's see how interesting it is, because what he actually tells us later on in the comments is that marriage is that sign of one of the primary acts of progress that we have in our society, although a lot of people may not believe so. But he goes on to say that it is exactly that allows us to establish fraternal solidarity, and it is something that can be found among all of the cultures, although in different types of expressions, and we already know about that. Later on, we're going to be talking about the aspect of monogamy and polygamy. But Allan Kardec goes on to explain, abolishing marriage would be a return to humankind's infancy, and would place us, human beings, even below some of the animals that have already demonstrated to us stable signs of unions, such as the black vulture that we mentioned in the beginning, and others such as the swans and some of the penguins and what have. And I, doing a little bit of research, I did find out that with the number of species on our planet, there's only really 3 or 5% that actually have been showing signs of stable unions among them, but it does show the progress of the intelligent principle before it becomes individualized, right? So this is really interesting to see, and this is the part of Spiritism that really blows our mind away, because it does show us a very broad view of our existence and of progress itself as well. But Teresinha de Oliveira brings us marriage in the light of Spiritism in this amazing lesson book that the United States Spiritist Federation has translated and made it available to us, in which she says that, examined from the standpoint of Spiritism precept, marriage is seen as the matrimonial union, not only of the physical, but also that type of union that is going to have inescapable spiritual character and implications for us. So it's something not to be taken lightly. And interestingly, we all know why we are supposed to have a marriage license. We know the legal aspects that goes with that, but it's interesting, right? Because we also need a license to drive. So it's a very serious business that we're talking here, and I'm just bringing a little bit of humor, but it's important that we understand the type of implications and also the type of marriages that we have on a planet such as the ones we have right now. And if you are considering marriage, or if you've been married, if you're in your first or second marriage, if you're someone who's really not open to the idea of marriage, this is where the study really sheds a lot of light, because Spiritism is that body of knowledge that allows us to think and ponder and dig a little deeper to understand all aspects of the human existence. And of course, marriage is a big one. I'm not sure if you're following, but I remember as a little girl imagining what my wedding day would be like, and the type of husband I would have, all of the romantic dreams that comes with it. But I'm gonna tell you the end of the story, the end of the movie. I did not get married at a church. I did not have the big flowy white dress. It was a very simple union, civic union that we had. And it was actually the happiest day of my life, because the dream of the essence is really what was present. And Spiritism pretty much supported the type of day that I had and the type of commitment and relationship husband and I have been building for the last 13 years. And Spiritism also promotes that, which is a very empowering tool that we have at our hands. But I wanted to bring the example of Tobias in the book Nosso Lar. And I'm not going to read the chapter because it's quite long. But Tobias is an interesting case because Tobias was married twice, right? And he is in the spirit realm, and he actually resides with both of his wives, his earthly wives, right? And we're going to see in the dialogue that one of them had the spiritual tie to him, the connection, whereas the other one, the second wife, was one based on fraternal ties. It was a different type of marriage, but nonetheless sacred. As we are going to find out from Andreia Lewis, all marriages, regardless of the type of marriages we might have, are actually sacred. And you're going to understand a little bit what I have to say. So Tobias is going to say true marriage. He starts out with the word true before marriage. True marriage is between soul and is thus a union that no one can break. So here he's telling us the aspect of the true marriage. Nobody can break it. That is the union of soul to soul. It's very profound. It's very significant. It is one where the immediate interest that a lot of women have, and men, why not say that? Sometimes they go into try to get out of a situation, or drawn of a financial situation, or because of someone's look, all of which extinguishes and breaks over time. He's talking about the union of souls, soul to soul. Very different aspect that he's bringing us here. He says there are marriages of love, of fraternity, the one that I just mentioned, the second wife for Tobias, and of trials, expiations, and duty. And also, Spiritism shows us another type, which is those that fall under a missionary type of spirits who come either together to fulfill something, some type of work propagating the good, or even when one is more elevated than the other, it is a mission to try to guide that spouse that he or she has been committed to even prior to reincarnation. So it constitutes a mission and a huge learning experience for the other one as well. Don't you be thinking that if you're married, you're on a mission. A lot of times, Tobias is going to tell us that the great majority of the marriages on our planet right now, a planet of trials and expiations, transitioning to a world of regeneration, they're made up mostly of trials and expiations and duties, because according to him, these are the type of relationships that our Father above is giving us, so that soul to soul united, they have the ability, they have the opportunity to have a reconciliation. Reconcile with your enemy while you are on the way. Wasn't that the teaching from Christ? Meaning reconcile. Make sure that you are able to get together and work out the difficulties while you're on the way with your enemy, or the one that has wronged you in the past, or the one that you have wronged in the past, so that we are actually able to evolve. And the reason for these type of marriages is so that we are able to solve problems that have been left from previous existences, regardless of whether we have these type of marriages of those that are based on fraternity or deep love or a mission. It doesn't matter. All of them are as important for the immortal souls that we can't even begin to understand. And so Tobias continues in stating, on the physical plane, in the planet's present evolutionary phase, there are very few unions between twin souls. And here is where I'm going to pause a little bit, because a lot of people think that they have their other half, or that there is a twin soul, but he's talking symbolically here. He's talking about the type of marriages that we mentioned in the beginning, the true marriage, which is that union of soul to soul that have already worked out a lot of the issues that an expiatory type of matrimony still has to go through. So he says there are only very few marriages between kindred souls, and an overwhelming percentage of the other type that brings about a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties. And so it's not by chance that we have amazing books, especially in the psychological series by Joana de Angelis, the spirit author Joana de Angelis, written by the medium Divaldo Pereira Franco, by his hands, it's what I mean, dictated to this medium, that comes to try to, so that we may find the solutions for any type of difficulties, challenges, obstacles that we may encounter. But then Allan Kardec, another question in the very same line, question 697, he asks the benevolent spirits, does the absolute indissolubility of marriage belong to the law of nature, or is it only a human law? Well, if marriage is part of a natural law, is the indissolubility of marriage part of this law of nature, or is it a human law? And so the benevolent spirits answer, it is a human law that is quite contrary to the law of nature. But humans may modify their laws, only those of nature are immutable. Immutable because the authors of such divine laws or natural laws is our Father above, immutable as well. And so these laws, they are for all times, except for the human laws. Those change, as we have come to see. If we take a look at our history, you're going to find out that divorce was only made legal in America in 1857. A lot of people are like, 1857, that's when the Spirit's book was published. One thing does not have anything to do with the other. I'm just saying that it was actually made legal in the US in 1857. Interesting, right? It hasn't been that long that we were made allowed to divorce our spouses. And so the Gospel according to Spiritism, lesson 22, Allan Kardec brings us the lesson contained in there, do not separate what God has joined. And we are going to find two items which Teresa de Oliveira also mentions, which is divorce and the indissolubility of marriage, right? And so she brings us a very significant phrase contained in Matthew chapter 19, in which Jesus replied to the Pharisees that questioned him about divorce, because they said Moses permitted men to divorce their wives. What do you say about that? And Jesus answered, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the very beginning. So human laws change, and sometimes they do come to pretty much allow for certain actions, for certain things to take place legally to assist us, as we see that there is a clear sign of progress. Although other people will say, well, divorce is not something that should be permissible, as we see in other religious philosophies, Spiritism comes to say that divorce is pretty much a human law that comes to legally separate that which is already separated as far as the ties of affection is concerned. In a lot of cases, we see people that they look for assistance with psychologists. They will go through couples therapies, and they find that they're more toxic together, especially when kids are concerned, as opposed to them being apart, meaning they would be much better people, much better parents if they were apart than living together. But what Teresa de Oliveira is bringing us in these beautiful lessons that we have here on marriage and divorce, and also the gospel according to Spiritism and evolution into worlds, is that it would be ideal that we should seek every alternative before we resort to divorce, before we resort to simply breaking the ties and going our separate ways. And this is something that we always talk to people about, the need to be truly honest with themselves and their feelings. And one of the responsibilities that we Spiritists have when we encounter a couple of friends or whomever look for us at the Spiritist Center saying, I am having a really hard time, my marriage has been suffering for the last few months, my husband and I are not seeing eye to eye, my wife and I are just not able to live cordially with each other. It seems like something is broken here and there. The last thing we should do is really encourage someone to take that huge step of either hurting themselves or becoming in a very compromising position, whereas they're actually breaking free from something, from a planning that was actually built in the spirit plane, like a business plan, if you will, that was built in the spirit plane, that it was planned around in the spirit plane. And so what we find in Spiritism is a lot of information that tells us about the need to resort to other type of solutions. So if we look for some people that have gone to couples therapy, and I can tell you that I know a few of them, and even from reading the book from Alberto de Almeida, the Forgiveness as the Way and the Way to Forgiveness, talks about some cases in marriages where one of the spouses were not faithful. And when one is willing to work out on forgiveness, on understanding, on trying to understand why that happened, and where both are able to pretty much own up to their responsibility for what is happening in the relationship, he says the relationship comes out stronger. And there are numerous cases where divorce just simply did not happen. And the couple actually grew better. They grew closer. They grew more loving, more affectionate, more in touch with each other's need. So it's really beautiful to see how some couples have the ability to look, even when it's hurting so much, to look for something that is going to help them actually be able to float a little bit easier on that tormentuous sea in which they see huge waves, and through therapy they find that there is a float in which they can rest, and eventually they are able to swim to shore again and walk side by side. But every case is a case, and we know about that. And one of the other reasons why they talk about trying to do everything they possibly can as opposed to simply resorting to divorce is because of this planning in the spirit world. Because let's see about this for a minute. If the great number of marriages on our planet is of trials, expiations, and duty is that moral responsibility that the person have first with oneself and then immediately towards someone else. That's in the gospel according to Spiritism. We are going to find that if there is a reason, there is something there that is calling our attention to work out. If there is smoke, there was a fire, right? If there is a smell of smoke, maybe there is a little fire that is going out, and we should work out on every possible resource that we have available to ensure that we put the fire out. So here is the thing that we find in Evolutions in Two Worlds. There is a question that is posed on chapter 8 called Marriage and Divorce. And the question posed was, could you give us some idea about marriage and divorce on the physical plane from the spiritual point of view? Now, this is really a beautiful question, right? Can we talk about marriage and divorce on the physical plane from a spiritual point of view? So they answer, in the higher spheres, evolved souls find it an honor to assist their less evolved brothers and sisters that remain in the lower spheres. We must remember that on Earth, marriage can take on various aspects with multiple purposes in mind. Here, I'm going to read again because I don't have the slide showing. We must remember that on Earth, marriage can take on various aspects with multiple purposes in mind. Consequently, incarnate men and women can experience marriage many times without finding the company of the kindred souls with whom they would accomplish the ideal union. Let's talk about the ideal union, because that's one of the mistakes a lot of people make when they look for the prince, the charming prince, or when they look for the princess. And I remember Alberto Almeida in one of his presentations here in Miami saying one day they woke up and the charming prince became a frog and the beautiful princess was actually a witch, right? Talking about the struggles that we face, and we realize that the ideal marriage that we had in mind is actually made up of two individuals who are not perfect. We are not perfect. We may have a beautiful relationship when we realize exactly that. When we look for someone and we realize, wow, there's great qualities, but there's also some frailties. It's not actually, we're not going to look at it as imperfections, as something really bad. We all have them. We all have what we call the baggage, right? One of the keys, and this I saw on a Hallmark card, is to find someone who's willing to help us unpack. And for that, we have to be willing to help the other person unpack as well. And that takes team effort. So the ideal union is something that we are still to see here on our planet. Perhaps we could shift our thinking, saying the ideal union would be one where you have two imperfect beings working together to become better human beings for each other and oneself. That's what we are aiming to do when we talk about marriage in the light of Spiritism. And so they continue. This is because according to the principles of cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, here's another natural law, it is usually necessary to redeem this or that debt connected with wrongly used sexual energy. And I remember that I was studying the book Missionaries of the Light, and this was brought on, how some of the unions that we have, we actually become very negatively compromised when we make wrong use of the sexual energy, when we resort to pornography, or when we resort to having multiple partners when we are in a relationship, we actually incur. And a lot of people think that the expiation, that the trial that they're undergoing is a punishment. And Spiritism tells us there is no such thing as punishment. What we have are consequences for our actions, cause and effect. So this is what they're bringing us here, is that according to the principle of cause and effect, we are in certain painful or challenging or trialsome relationships because we are trying to redeem this or that debt that we incurred in a previous existence. As for divorce, according to what we know on the spirit plane, this is the answer. According to what we know in the spirit plane, our opinion is that it should not be encouraged or facilitated, because on earth there are no marriages, legalized or not, that do not have serious implications concerning the responsibility assumed by the couple. I remember meeting a couple who actually came to the center, and they were looking for the fraternal assistance at the center. And they were going through a really hard time. And I remember that Marcelo, my husband, listened to the husband, and I was in the other room with the wife. And of course, we're not changing cards or anything about it. But I remember that one of the things, because they worked out the relationship, and one of the things that the two of them told us together is that what really gave them the strength was that neither one of us facilitated or encouraged or talk about, the aspect, yeah, you have your free will, go ahead and do it. To the contrary, we offer them an opportunity to consider the marriage, to consider the relationship, to consider the family that they wanted to build, meaning we uplifted them on the idea of what they had in mind when they met each other. And I remember another friend of mine who actually came to me to talk to me about her husband's infidelities. And instead of telling her, yeah, you should divorce this guy, he has been cheating on you, I actually gave her other types of not counsel, because I'm not a psychologist, but some guidance, some friendly advice on what I believed should be done. And she thanked me for doing that, because she said that all of her other girlfriends basically put a lot of wood on the fire, meaning they really encouraged her to end her marriage. And they're fine today, and they're happy with one another. So this is what we're talking about here. So they continue to answer. He says, humans just recently abandoned polygamy. Well, some cultures still in polygamy, and they will still suffer its animalistic suggestions. Consequently, at the first sign of difficulty in the task to which they were called, they usually desert the post where life has placed them. At the very first sign of difficulty. And I remember reading about this couple who had been married for 63 years. And I've mentioned this in other presentations that I had before, but I just found it to be fantastic. They asked him, what is the secret to a long-lasting marriage? 63 years. And he answered, I was born at a time when something broke in our house. We fixed it. We didn't throw it away and bought a new one. So it gives us an idea that perhaps a lot of people closer to this, generation have had this idea that marriage is disposable. At the very first sign of difficulty, let me get out of it. It's too much. I don't want to deal with it. It's taking too much energy out of me. I better get out of it, without really thinking about the responsibilities, the implications, the fact that whatever we don't work out in this existence, in that relationship, it will be postponed. It's not simply going to be erased. And it might come back again in the very same form, spouses together, or children, or parents. We know about that with reincarnation, how it works. But this is basically what they were telling us, is that we need to be mindful not to get out of the relationship when the very first sign of difficulty appears, because the very sign of difficulty perhaps is appearing because we are ready to deal with that, to undo that knot. I like to compare relationships, really hard relationships that some of us might have, whether it be with a spouse, with a child, with a parent, as a beautiful necklace, a very thin one. Let's pretend that this is just one strand of the necklace that I have on, and it is very fine. And you threw it on a drawer and it got tossed around with other things. And when you find it, it's full of knots, right? And unless you're very careful at doing one by one, you break it and it's irreparable. So a lot of times the relationship that we have in our marriages is that very delicate necklace, whether it's gold, diamond, whatever, you prefer. It is a very delicate necklace that needs to be unknotted little by little, taking one's time, either not to break or to cause it where it's, no longer able to be utilized, right? Not that we're using a person. I'm just saying the type of, symbolically speaking, the type of relationships that are hard usually are calling us to really be mindful of why there might be certain knots there to be undone. So before a conjugal separation, as the lesson continues, we are actually called upon to resort to understanding, to bring into an agreement, to encourage a dialogue between spouses. If they are unable to dialogue with each other, to seek the assistance of a psychologist who may be knowledgeable in couples therapy. There are so many, and of course we don't recommend any of them because we don't know them personally. But if we were to search for the information, even with our own doctors, physicians, they might be able to guide us towards somebody who is really great. We are also talked about the meditation and prayer and the meeting of spiritual assistance at the Spiritist Center, because as Teresa de Oliveira reminds us, a lot of times issues arise in the family because of that persistency from the low order spirits who wish to cause us harm and difficult situations and painful type of relationships. So unless we are made aware of that and we start understanding a little bit about how obsession works, about the influence of spirits in our daily lives, and that's question 459 of the Spirits book, where the influence of the spirits is so great that often it seems like they're the one guiding us. Things can become very difficult. So this is why it's important to study. And here in my household, I'm going to share, it's okay. I'm sure Marcella's not going to mind. We've had arguments, who hasn't? But it's interesting because usually one of us will hear really loud in our minds, go be the first one to apologize. And by the way, our arguments doesn't last that long. Maybe because of the fact that we do the gospel at home, because we are always engaged in the Spiritist activity, and we are always seeking to elevate our minds and change our vibrations, right, our frequency, to be able to hear the loving suggestions from the benefactors in the spirit world, because we know that no one is safe from falling into the praise or the accidents or the type of entrapments that the Lord spirits throw our way to cause disharmony and imbalance and all of the other very tough situations that come from being unaware of what may be happening around us. And sometimes it's, I just had a really bad day. And unaware, frequency has, decreased, the vibrations. I haven't done my daily prayers. I haven't read anything uplifting. And I get home and, one word from Marcelo that is misunderstood, I blow up on him, right? So we have to have this ability to learn how to dance with the rhythm of the songs and have understanding and seek to find why is it that this is happening in my house? Could there be a spiritual influence? If so, maybe the Spiritist Center and those that are in the fraternal assistance can help us. Maybe somebody can come to our home and show us how to do the gospel at home. I'm sure the United States Spiritist Federation have material on that. It's really important that we maintain that we spiritually cleanse, that we do the hygiene in our, much like we do a weekly cleaning. We should also, physical cleaning where we are dusting and cleaning and mopping the floors. We should also do that spiritually speaking, meaning when we are doing the gospel at home, we are inviting the presence of our Master Jesus, the benevolent spirits. We are asking them to help us sort out the difficulties that we are having, and the relationship often gets strength. As a matter of fact, there is a study that does reveal that praying together actually is actually beneficial to the couple. It makes the relationship stronger. So this is another tip that we can leave here. But when a divorce takes place and it's unavoidable, one of the things that needs to be brought on is the knowledge that although they may not have honored the commitment, and they might be missing out on gaining more spiritually speaking, if you will, but they realize that they're hurting more of each other, that they're maybe even becoming more in debt with one another, then perhaps it is better to separate. When everything has been done, when all of the solutions have been sought and nothing actually has worked, perhaps it is better to separate. And it's always a sad situation. Sometimes even the other person doesn't want to hear, so you really have no choice because of the other person's own free will. We need to be mindful also to forgive, to work out on that which actually has caused a lot of pain, the healing time that is needed, so that eventually we may be able to have a healthy relationship, as opposed to Teresa de Oliveira suggests jumping into a relationship really quickly, because one, we may not be ready, and two, if there is a separation, who knows? There might actually be some time where a couple may be able to work their differences out and get together again. The other things that I wanted to bring about really quickly here has to do with Spiritist weddings. And for this, I'm going to invite you to read on the case of the marriage between Antonina and Mario in the book Between Heaven and Earth, in which we are shown what a Spiritist wedding, what a Spiritist ceremony looks like. Now, I am a notary here in Florida. I don't know if you knew that or not. I can marry people in Florida, and I have been invited to say something at a wedding or do a prayer, but never like in a ritual type of thing. People go to their civil part first, where they get their license to get married, and then when there's a civil ceremony, a lot of what I have seen that is explained in the case of Antonina and Mario is a beautiful spiritual celebration that often is held outside of the Spiritist Center, so that it doesn't give this idea that there is a character of official religious type of ceremony. So it's at a country club, someone's house, like it happened for Antonina and Mario. It could be in the backyard. It's beautiful options for a spiritual wedding ceremony. The prayer could be done by a relative. We don't need to call the director of the Spiritist Center because he or she is the president. We don't need any of that. It could be somebody who we are very close to, who are so happy for the union. It could really be anybody that is in the moment they're celebrating with us, and this can be made ahead of time. But one of the things that stick out in the Spiritist wedding between Antonina and Mario was the intense spiritual participation of the spirits who are actually celebrating with them. Because it was that sign of that union that was taking place, that was both of them responding to the calling made prior to their incarnation. And once again, the business plan made in the beyond are always created to succeed. So whenever there is a union of two beings who love each other and are going into marriage for the right reasons, the spirit plane celebrates also. And this is what is so beautiful about this chapter in the book Between Heaven and Earth, that tells about the case of Antonina and Mario and how a spiritist wedding should look like. So just to say that in case you're a spiritist and you're like, I want to get married, but should I do it at a church? And this is something else that Teresinha de Oliveira addresses in this lesson, is that a lot of times you might have someone who is not a spiritist, and then you have someone who may be Catholic or may be Buddhist, or may have other types of choice of philosophy. And although she talks about getting to know one another in the religious aspect, love speaks really loud on top of those that really doesn't matter that much. And I'm going to explain myself why I'm saying this. I know of this couple in our Spiritist Center where we have, I'm not going to say her name, as if she's watching, I don't want her to feel embarrassed, but she's a spiritist. I mean, she's in 3-4 meetings at the Spiritist Center, and her husband is Baptist, but he's so strong in his conviction with Christ and his relationship, his religiousness with God, that it worked out. He respects her work at the Spiritist Center, and she respects the fact that he doesn't want to go to the Spiritist Center. She does the gospel at home, and although he doesn't want to partake in it, she sometimes asks him to at least do the initial prayer, in which he does. Sometimes he doesn't, and that's okay too, because he also does his own prayers. So in the aspect of having this type of difficulties between one and the other thing that she tells us is that we should do what we think is right as far as a spiritual spiritist ceremony and wedding is concerned. So if one of the spouses really wants to have the big white dress and get married at the church, if it's allowed, it's okay. And it made me think about my mother-in-law. My father-in-law passed away, discarnated in early January, and I went to 5 masses, Catholic masses in Brazil. Now, I'm not Catholic, but the respect for the family and for my mother-in-law, whose heart was bleeding, I went. And I remembered my early days as a child in Catholic schools and in Catholic churches, going to masses prior to going out with my friends. And it gave me a sense of doing what was right for the one that I love. So love is that very strong power that truly goes above and beyond anything that might cause some type of difficult situations in any type of relationship. And this is something that I wanted to leave here with you as we are coming to the end of our study. And I just wanted to say that there is a lot that needs to be covered for this topic, and I invite you to read the books that we mentioned at the beginning. And if you have any questions directly, I'm certain that one of the volunteers from the United States Spiritist Federation will be happy to address after we are done with this presentation, because we do have some questions that came to us, and we may not have a lot of time to discuss what we other things that might come up at the study right now. So one of the questions is, can you talk a little bit about polygamy? This is something that we mentioned as we were doing our study, right? Polygamy and monogamy. I remember somebody telling me one day that polygamy was something that should not be looked down upon because it's the ability to love many people, right? And as you can imagine, this brought on a lot of discussion at the Spiritist Center. And so I always forward to the Spirit's book when things like this arise, so that it's not my opinion and it is that of the high order spirits, because we all have different opinions as human beings, which differ based on our understanding of life, our experiences, our culture, our society, and what have you. But polygamy is what spirits will tell us to be considered a human law, right? And if there is a day that abolishing it comes to place, they will say that that in itself will mark a step towards social progress. And the reason they say that is because marriage, monogamy, should be based on the love of individuals too, who join in hands. Whereas in polygamy, what we find to have is not the essence of true love, but nothing more, nothing less than what the spirits will call this sensuality that is really, really the factor that is driving those types of relationship, right? Eventually, I know that in the United States, polygamy is not legal, but some cultures have actually made it where they're able to marry multiple people. And so Spiritism will say that as we continue striving for social perfection, for social progress, and really make marriage, monogamy, that aspect of the union of two souls, building upon solidarity, fraternity, and love, really the, par excellence type of sentiment, which is our objective, then little by little, polygamy will disappear. So hopefully that answers the question, and we don't mean any type of offense to anybody who may be watching. We're just bringing our spiritist perspective. If there is a commitment made in the spirit realm prior to our present reincarnation, doesn't mean that somewhere we each have our other half. And this is a very good question, because we mentioned earlier on the text that we read from Tobias, the twin soul. And yes, a lot of people do believe that they have this twin soul, made just for them. And some even believe that this other half actually, let's say we were created together and then separated. So in another part in the world, there is someone who is my other half. And the spirits also actually address that in stating that there is no particular or predestined union between the two souls. Like in the way that is explained, unity exists among all spirits. This is something that we are going to understand little by little, but in different types of degrees according to the order in which we occupy, meaning the degree of purification. So at our stage, we're still imperfect beings. We are walking towards becoming more perfected. So the greater the purification, the more united we are going to be. But what the benefactors tell us as far as the other half is concerned is that it is incorrect. Because if there is another half, then it means that the other one will be incomplete if separate from each other. And that doesn't make a lot of sense from a spiritist perspective. And although this is very romantic, right? And you say you complete me or you're my other half, in essence, really what attracts us is the sympathy that we have for one another, which is going to be the result of the harmony of our tendencies toward each other, that which actually makes us distinct to one another. So if we were to actually, if I was to have my other half and be, some part of the universe or planet Earth, and I haven't found them yet, it would mean that I would lose my individuality. And the individuality of the spirit is that which we never lose. It's part of who we are. So when I die, what all that I am, when I discarnate, all that I am, my perfections, my imperfections I acquired in this physical existence goes with me. It's part of my individuality. As I grow, as I evolve, as I purify, that individuality stays with me. It doesn't get, divided. So hopefully that answered that as well. Some people choose a life of celibacy, a life with no marriage. Is this considered to be a sacrifice for certain individuals who desire to devote themselves entirely to serving humankind? This is a very good question as well, because, and this is actually part of our discussion on Missionaries of the Light 3-4 weeks ago when we were talking about marriage. And the name Divaldo Pereira Franco came up, right? Because we have this amazing medium and founder of the Mansion of the Way in Brazil with Nilson de Souza. And we, when we think about Divaldo, this missionary, or when we think about Mother Teresa, or other individuals who have dedicated their entire existence towards propagating the good, towards serving humankind, we find that the spirits will tell us that every personal sacrifice that is made to benefit humankind is meritorious when it is made for the good, right? So the greater the sacrifice, the greater the merit. And so I started thinking about Divaldo, who just completed 75 years of public speaking and dissemination of Spiritism, a man who is 95 years old today, whose entire life has been dedicated towards service for humanity. And that in itself is a huge sacrifice, because we can't imagine a life like that where you're traveling constantly, where you're giving of yourself, where you're taking the time to dry others' tears and you're alone to dry your own. So there is so many aspects, different aspects of this, that it's hard to put into words. But people like him and others came into my mind when we were thinking about this. Francis of Assisi, a lot of people, he did have Clara of Assisi as his loved ones, yeah, but it was a different type of relationship, mission type of unions of two souls who are so above matter that we can't even conceive the type of life that they held, the life that they had. All we know is the example that they left us, which is that the only way to live, the only good way to live, is when we are of service. And in any good marriage, one of the things that I perhaps can live anybody here live with, in my very shy 13 years of marriage, is that what works is when we are serving each other, when we are available to each other, when we allow the other to become whom they are, when we allow the other to become truly in the sense naked before us with their own frailties and qualities, and we love them anyway because we know that we can do the same and they will love us anyway. But I leave you with another thought. If divorce is inescapable, the one thing that we should work on is trying to diminish and work on any type of ill feelings that maybe have behind, because that only hurts us in the end. It is going to accompany us in the spirit realm. It is going to be something that is going to cause us a lot of harm and suffering. So we should work on that and try to become at least friends if we are unable to stay in that marriage. And if you're wondering whether a second marriage is okay, if maybe the first one was the it marriage, I can tell you that it's okay to be open to love again and to welcome a relationship, as I know there are many couples who did that and they're very happy and fulfilled in their relationship with that new spouse. So with that, I thank you. And I thank the United States Spiritist Federation for this moment, for this opportunity. And I say, until then, till we meet again.